This is just a nice sort of businessman who got off the wrong foot. And it's clear that he wouldn't have said that had he known more about the man and more about this connection.
Well, I wish I had known the information for the purpose of sentencing. But by the same token, sentencing has no relevance to the legal maintainability of the prosecution. I wanted the sentence to be higher, and if I had been armed with this information at the time of sentencing, I feel confident that Judge DeHonda's decision to give VAID the probated sentence that he did would have been different. But we did not have that information. He asked me from the bench, do you have any evidence that this man is an agent of the Pakistani government? I said, no, I don't. So if I had had this, I might have had a good argument that he was operating at the behest of the government, as I suspected from the beginning. But I didn't have this, so...
But you did. That's, my point.
I didn't have it.
But it was there in the file.
I was the one speaking for the government in court, and I didn't have it.
Right. Do you think Washington knew? Do you think the senior officials in the State Department or in the Justice Department knew?
I just don't know.
You made no clue, no indication?
No clue, no indication.
Sam took some pleasure in our little confrontation over the fact that during a preliminary hearing in this case, he did describe VAID as an agent of the Pakistani government. I don't think there's that much pleasure to be had either for Sam or the federal government in this case. The fact is the documents we have in our possession indicate that officials at the Customs Bureau knew that Mr. VAID was in direct contact with the senior officials of the Pakistani Atomic Energy Agents Commission, men who were directly involved in making the bomb. They knew it from day one of the case. These documents received, along with telexes showing trafficking, specific dealings on the Krytrons. They knew this within a few days of the bust, and they made no effort to analyze or interpret the data. And it's a terrific failure. They had documents directly linking VAID to the bomb, and they didn't even know what they were.
This is not the telex I sent. Could be a fabrication, first of all. Number one, I will not accept this as an authenticated evidence to anything what you're claiming. Number two, I never knew the buyer which is being proved by this text. I've sent this text. I don't refuse that.
You sent this text?
Yeah, text, but not the names at the top. I was shown this telex in past, and I even contradicted right at that stage.
You were shown this telex by whom?
By my lawyers.
But not by anybody in the government?
No.
Did any government official broach these letters to you?
No.
Mr. Butt has been identified by American officials as the single key man in the Pakistani government that has been responsible for arranging the covert and overt shipment of various parts needed to make the bomb and the weapons assembly.
That's why they have put his name on these telexes.
Mr. VAID, who would fabricate these?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I mean, do you really think that the American government would fabricate a series of what seemed to be...
I'm not blaming American government. I'm blaming nobody for that. But as far as I'm concerned, I have nothing to do with these telexes.
Mr. VAID, these are your telexes.
They are not mine.
Mr. VAID, I posit to you this, sir. It is my belief that you were purchasing Krytrons in violation of American law at the direct behest of Mr. Butt and Colonel Dar, the men who are at the top of the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission, men who have been directly linked to Pakistan's clandestine efforts to make the bomb. I don't think you've been telling the truth about your connection, and I think these documents show that you have not.
It's your accusation. I had many accusations in past, and I accept this too with a smile. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Mr. VAID, and have a good trip back. There are many at fault for the government's inability to learn the truth about NAZIR VAID. Some in Houston, but far more in Washington. The investigators in Houston had discovered documents whose significance they did not grasp, primarily because the names of S.A. Butt and Colonel Dar, amazingly, did not show up in the Treasury Department files and computers relied upon by the customs agents who broke the case. But there were also those officials in Washington, more knowledgeable about Pakistan and non-proliferation, who should have known the significance of this case. None would talk. Just to remind him, please, that we're very anxious to get the State Department side of this story. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. There are agencies of the federal government specifically charged with monitoring cases like this. The Justice Department's Division of Internal Security, the Pentagon's Office of International Security Policy, and the State Department's Office of Non-Proliferation and Export Policy. Trying to arrange an interview with Secretary Murphy. We need somebody to stand up and articulate what the administration's policy is. After many weeks, many telephone calls, and many visits, the State Department reluctantly agreed to an off-the-record briefing. I've just returned from a series of meetings in the State Department on the VAID case. And as usual, once back in Washington, I'm not allowed to tell you with whom I was talking or at what level the officials were that were speaking to me. And the contrast between Washington and Houston couldn't have been more startling. Here I'm getting gobbledygook, and in Houston we could put people on camera, ask questions, raise issues directly. And I'm not allowed to tell you very much about my meetings except to say, after a lot of the consideration and thought, I presume, the government was finally able to come up with a 3-paragraph response to a series of questions I've asked about this case. And in essence, what these people and the officials with whom I'm talking dealt directly with non-proliferation and also with Pakistan. What they said was this. 1, the Department of State kept in close touch with the VAID case. 2, it urged that the laws be fully prosecuted in the case. And 3, it was asked by the Department of Justice to provide an expert witness on Pakistan bomb making for the prosecution of this case. It chose not to do so for 2 reasons. 1, because the law under which VAID was prosecuted did not deal with the intent of his act, as we know, as we all well know. That it didn't matter where the end use of the Critrons was or what it was to be. And 2, as the statement says, such testimony would necessarily entail revelation of highly classified information. So what the government is saying, the Department of State is saying to me, in essence, and to you, is trust us. We have some very highly classified information about VAID, they said. Don't worry, we know who he was. And never mind that we weren't able to tell the Justice Department about it, or we clearly weren't able to tell the judge in making the sentencing on the case about it. He certainly had no idea. But we're following it closely, and just don't sweat it, is what they said. And when I raised the obvious questions as a journalist, what about the public policy question? What about the issue of how much the public should be told and the Congress about what the Pakistani government was doing? What about the fact that an official of or a representative of the Pakistani government presumably was in this country purchasing nuclear bomb parts and caught? Shouldn't the public know? And the answer was they do know. An official looked me in the eye and said, don't you think that anybody reading the press accounts of this case, the VAID case, would understand that VAID was only here at the behest of the Pakistani government? Wouldn't that be the only thing they could conclude? The Reagan administration's decision not to grant on-the-record interviews is clearly linked to its policy towards the military government of Pakistan's president, General Zia-ul-Haq. Officially, the U.S. government accepts President Zia's denials of nuclear ambitions. Democratic Senator Alan Cranston of California has been the leading congressional critic of U.S. policy towards Pakistan.
I can't figure out what the administration has in mind in regard to Pakistan and the bomb. I guess they just feel that if they sweet-talk Pakistan and keep on giving assistance to Pakistan, that Pakistan will be nice and well-behaved and not develop a nuclear capacity or never threaten to use it or use it. But that could be a dream world. And the continued progress by Pakistan toward nuclear weapons raises grave concerns in India and in other countries and could lead to a firestorm that could sweep the world. And now members of Congress are concerned about the fact that Pakistan is on the frontier of Russian expansionism in Afghanistan, and that we need to maintain a friendly relationship, according to these people, with Pakistan in order to help get aid into the rebels in Afghanistan. I believe that our relationship is so important to Pakistan that we have some leverage we could use to prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon.
You honestly believe that if we decided to, we could dissuade Zia from going ahead with making bombs?
I believe we could dissuade Zia from going ahead if we used all the leverage we have. He needs us more than we need him.
Thomas Graham became an expert on Pakistan's nuclear policies while serving as a foreign affairs officer in the Arms Control Agency. Tom, do you think that the senior officials of Pakistan find the American position on non-proliferation to be credible?
No, I think their actions show that they believe that if they keep pushing, the United States will keep backing off. It's happened for several administrations. It would be very logical from their point of view to think that it would continue to happen, short of Pakistan actually using a nuclear weapon.
So President Zia has nothing to lose by pushing forward, is that the point?
If I were Zia, I would work as hard as I could to complete my nuclear program, because I would guess that the United States would in the end do nothing about it.
Why aren't there more people articulating what you're willing to articulate, which is that this question of proliferation had better be moved from wherever it is down near the bottom up to the top of priorities? Do you have any idea, any ideas as you think about it?
The main problem in this administration is that there are very few senior officials who actually follow this subject. There's no one on the NSC staff, no one on the policy planning staff, and very little interest in this at the level of the President, Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of State. So the people who are working on it are working quite hard, but they're not in a position to make the final decisions that need to be made.
Paul Warnke served as director of the Arms Control Agency under President Carter.
The relatively casual attitude that was taken by the United States toward this episode can only lead people to feel that we don't really care that much as to whether or not proliferation takes place. And I think that there's a certain disrespect now for the non-proliferation regime.